Hey, quick question for you. Have you ever heard about the invisible line in Indonesia that animals refuse to cross? Like, they just won't do it. Tigers on one side, kangaroo-like creatures on the other, and somehow neither group crosses over, even though the water between them is barely wider than the Hudson River. Sounds insane, right? Sounds like something your conspiracy-loving uncle would forward you on Facebook at 2 a.m. But here's the thing, it's real, and the story behind it might be one of the wildest scientific mysteries you've never heard of. What's up, history fans? Welcome back to the Epic History Vibe. Today, we're diving into the strange case of the Wallace Line, an invisible boundary that splits the animal kingdom in half, broke Victorian science wide open, and almost stole Charles Darwin's biggest moment. Let's get into it. Okay, so let me paint the picture for you. If you pull up a map of Indonesia, you'll see thousands of islands packed together in this beautiful tropical archipelago. And right in the middle of all those islands, between two specific ones, Bali and Lombok, there's something really weird going on. These two islands, they're close, like really close. We're talking about 22 miles apart. That's roughly the distance from Manhattan to Stamford, Connecticut. On a clear day, you can literally stand on the beach in Bali and see Lombok across the water. You could practically wave at people on the other side. But here's where it gets bizarre. On the Bali side, the western side, you've got animals that look exactly like what you'd expect from Asia. Tigers, elephants, rhinos, orangutans, monkeys swinging through the trees. Classic Asian wildlife, the kind you'd see in a National Geographic documentary about Southeast Asia. Now, you cross that little 22-mile stretch of water to Lombok, and everything changes. Tigers? Gone. Elephants? Nowhere. Instead, you start seeing marsupials, animals with pouches, cousins of kangaroos and possums, the kind of stuff you'd expect to find in Australia, not 22 miles off the coast of Bali. And it's not just the land animals. Some people will tell you the birds don't cross either. They'll tell you the fish in the ocean don't swim across this invisible line. Same water, same reef system, but somehow there's this boundary that nature itself seems to respect, which, come on, that can't be real, right? I mean, when you first hear this, your brain immediately goes into skeptic mode. Mine did. This sounds like one of those TikTok facts that gets repeated a million times until everyone just assumes it's true. Because think about it, animals don't read maps. They don't know there's an invisible line they're not supposed to cross. A bird's gonna fly wherever the wind takes it. A fish is gonna swim wherever the current goes. So what's the deal? Is this just internet nonsense? Some viral myth that got out of control? Here's the twist though, and this is what makes this story so good. It's not internet nonsense. This isn't some conspiracy theory cooked up by a guy in his basement. This line is real. It has a name. It's been studied by scientists for over 160 years. It's in biology textbooks, and the man who discovered it, he almost became more famous than Charles Darwin. Let me take you back to the 1850s. Picture this. A young British naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace is wandering around the Malay archipelago. He's broke, he's getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, he's catching tropical diseases left and right, and he's spending 8 years of his life collecting bugs and birds and lizards and shipping them back to England. This dude was hardcore. Like, he collected over 125,000 specimens by hand in the 1800s with no air conditioning. Respect. And somewhere around year 4 or 5, Wallace starts noticing something really strange. He's hopping from island to island, and he realizes that when he crosses this one specific stretch of water between Bali and Lombok, the animals just change completely, like someone flipped a switch. He writes in his journal something like, "I have crossed from one world into another." That's a direct vibe from his notes. The guy was shook. Now, here's where the drama kicks in, because what Wallace was discovering didn't just challenge what people knew about geography. It challenged the entire religious worldview of Victorian England. See, back in the 1850s, most people in the West believed in something called special creation. The idea was God created every animal perfectly suited to its environment. Tropical climate, God made tropical animals for it. Cold climate, God made cold weather animals. Same environment should equal same animals. Simple, clean, divinely organized. But Wallace's discovery threw a grenade into that whole idea, because Bali and Lombok have basically the same environment, same temperature, same rainfall, same kind of jungle. So if God custom-built animals for environments, why are the animals on these two nearly identical islands completely different species? This was a huge problem for the religious establishment, and it gets worse, because at this exact same time, on the other side of of the world, there was another guy quietly working on a theory that would change biology forever. His name was Charles Darwin. Okay, so we'll come back to the Darwin drama in a minute because, oh boy, it gets juicy. But first, let me actually answer the question you've been wondering this whole time. Why don't the animals cross? What's actually going on here? The answer is buried, literally, under millions of years of geological history. So here's the deal. Earth's surface isn't one solid piece. It's broken up into these massive puzzle pieces called tectonic plates. And these plates are constantly drifting around at about the speed your fingernails grow. Slow, but over millions of years, it adds up. The Wallace Line sits exactly on the boundary where two of these massive plates meet, the Eurasian plate coming from Asia and the Australian plate coming up from the south. And here's the kicker. These two plates were separated by a massive ocean for about 50 million years. 50 million years. That's how long the animals on each plate were evolving completely independently. Asia was developing its tigers, its elephants, its primates. Meanwhile, Australia and its surrounding islands were developing their own thing. Marsupials, weird flightless birds, bizarre creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth. And then, slowly, over those millions of years, the two plates started drifting toward each other, closer, closer, until eventually they ended up where they are today, almost touching, but not quite. But here's the thing that the maps don't show you. If you dive down between Bali and Lombok, the water gets deep, like surprisingly deep. We're talking over 800 feet straight down. And if you go a little further north, between Borneo and Sulawesi, it plunges to over 6,500 feet. That's deeper than the Grand Canyon. That deep underwater trench, that's the scar left over from where those two ancient continents finally met. It's a literal underwater wall, and it gets even crazier. About 12,000 years ago, during the last ice age, so much of Earth's water was frozen up in glaciers that ocean levels were about 400 feet lower than they are today, which means a lot of those islands we see now, they weren't islands back then. They were connected to the mainland by dry land. Animals could just walk across. On the Asian side, that landmass is called the Sunda Shelf. On the Australian side, it's called the Sahul Shelf. Animals roamed freely across each shelf, but they could never cross the deep water in between. Even at the lowest sea levels in the Ice Age, that trench was still way too deep to walk across. So that's your answer. The reason tigers don't show up in Lombok and kangaroos don't show up in Bali isn't because of some mystical force field. It's because for 50 million years, the ancestors of those animals were on completely different continents. By the time the continents got close, evolution had already gone in two completely different directions. Now, I want to be straight with you because this is where pop science usually gets it wrong. The Wallace Line is real, but it's not a perfect, magical barrier. Modern biologists will tell you that some animals absolutely do cross it. Birds fly across all the time. They ride the wind. They don't care about underwater trenches. Some plants spread their seeds across by wind or by floating on the ocean. And there's this one type of primate called the tarsier that apparently rafted across on floating logs millions of years ago and set up shop on the other side. Little dude just hitched a ride. Even some sea creatures cross over, depending on the currents. So the line isn't a wall, it's more like a really strong filter. Most animals can't cross it, some can, and the ones that do cross often don't survive on the other side because the climate's slightly different. Asia is more humid, Australia is drier, and they just can't adapt fast enough. Modern scientists have actually drawn other lines too. There's the Weber line, the Lydecker line. They're all trying to refine Wallace's original idea, but Wallace was first, and his line is still the most famous, because sometimes in science, being first is everything. Speaking of being first, let's get back to that Darwin drama I promised you, because this is honestly one of the most underrated stories in scientific history. So Wallace is out there in Indonesia, sweating in the jungle, discovering this line, and he's putting together a theory in his head. He's thinking animals are different on different islands because they evolved separately. They adapted to their environments over time through some kind of natural process. Sound familiar? Yeah, he's basically inventing the theory of evolution by natural selection at the same time as Charles Darwin, completely independently on the other side of the planet. In 1858, Wallace writes up his theory in a letter and mails it to a famous British scientist for feedback. That scientist? He happens to be friends with Darwin. He shows Darwin the letter, and Darwin, who has been sitting on his own version of this theory for 20 years without publishing it, basically panics. He's like, oh no, this random guy in Indonesia is about to scoop me on the biggest scientific idea of the century. So Darwin rushes to publish On the Origin of Species the very next year, in 1859, and history mostly remembers him as the lone genius who figured out evolution. But Wallace was right there with him. He just got there second. Honestly, though, here's what makes the story beautiful. Wallace was apparently a genuinely good guy about it. He didn't fight Darwin for credit. He didn't start a feud. He just let Darwin take the spotlight and went back to studying bugs. Imagine being that guy. Imagine being so chill about losing the biggest scientific race in history. Anyway, that's a whole other video. If you want to hear the full Wallace versus Darwin story, the letters, the betrayal, the friendship that came after, drop a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this one, smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive, and share it with that one friend who loves weird history. I'm out. See you in the next one.